All right, let's get right into it. Today we're tackling a concept that, let's be honest, can be a real stumbling block for a lot of us. It's this idea that God does everything for his own glory. I mean, when you first hear that, it's hard not to ask the question you see right here. Does God have an ego problem? It can sound kind of narcissistic, right? Like everything he does is for his own sake. And that's a tough pill to swallow for many people, Christians included. And this isn't some new 21st century hang-up. This feeling of resistance to a God who seems to be all about self-exaltation, well, that's a deeply human thing. It's been a struggle for people for, well, forever. But the thing is, the Bible doesn't shy away from this at all. It puts it front and center. I mean, look at this verse from Isaiah. God says it not once, but twice. For my own sake, I do it. He's crystal clear that he will not give his glory to another. This isn't some minor point, it's a major theme. So what's with the pushback? Why do we find this so difficult? Well, it's because we have this really weird love-hate relationship with glory. On the one hand, who doesn't like being praised? We've all got this built-in reflex to enjoy being celebrated. But then, on the other hand, it's pretty much a universal rule that we can't stand seeing that same kind of self-promotion in other people. And if we're being really honest, we don't even like it when we see it in ourselves. It's a total paradox. And it gets even messier. Just think about those cocky heroes in movies. The brilliant but arrogant detective or the swaggering fighter pilot. We kind of love their confidence, right? We cheer for them. But the second they cross a line, the second they use their amazing skills to hurt someone innocent, that admiration just evaporates. It turns into repulsion. So yeah, our feelings about this whole self-exaltation thing are complicated. Okay, so the Bible actually has a name for where this resistance comes from. It's not just a personality quirk or a simple preference. No, it goes way deeper than that, to what the scripture calls the mind of the flesh. You see, our problem with God being all about his own glory, that's usually just a cover for something much more fundamental. The real issue is a kind of hostility, not just to a God who glorifies himself, but to any God who claims authority over our lives at all. The Apostle Paul lays this out for us in Romans chapter 8. He talks about this mind of the flesh as the default setting for the human heart, before the Spirit of God comes in and does a complete renovation. And by its very nature, this mindset is hostile to God. It just can't submit to his law. It's incapable of it. And this isn't just one small part of us. It's the whole operating system. This mind is actively hostile. It doesn't submit to God's law. In fact, Paul says it cannot submit. And because of that, it can't please God. At its core, it's a resistance to any and all divine authority. So where do we go from here? How do we get past this natural resistance? Well, we have to start by really understanding what God's aim is when he talks about acting for his glory. Because I guarantee you, it's not what our gut reaction tells us it is. The great theologian Jonathan Edwards thought a lot about this. In his famous work, The End for Which God Created the World, he basically scoured the scriptures and came to this conclusion. Everything God does, everything he creates and sustains has one single final goal. And that goal, as Edwards puts it, is the glory of God. Now here's where it gets really interesting. What do we even mean by God's glory? It's not just one thing, like his power or his knowledge. Think of it more like the stunning beauty of the entire panorama of all his perfections. It's his wisdom, his justice, his goodness, his mercy, all of it, working together in perfect, breathtaking harmony. So when God acts for his glory, he's not trying to get something he doesn't have. He's displaying and communicating this incredible beauty that he already is. Okay, so if we hold on to that definition, we can start to see this whole thing in a completely different light. What if God acting for his glory isn't a selfish thing? What if it's actually the most loving, most generous thing he could possibly do? Let's try a few analogies. What if God's pursuit of his glory is less like a needy bully on the playground trying to make himself feel big, and more like a superstar athlete who goes back to his old neighborhood court not to show off, but just to share the absolute joy of the game with the kids who adore him? Or what if it's less like some quack doctor putting up a big flashy sign to sell snake oil, and more like the only real doctor in town hanging a shingle because he's the only one who has the cure for a plague that's wiping everyone out? In that case, him promoting himself is actually an act of rescue, isn't it? And how about this one? What if it's less like an insecure teacher trying to pad his resume and more like the greatest artist who has ever lived offering a free masterclass just because he wants to share the beauty and the secrets of his craft with anyone who wants to learn?
And here's the one that really hits home. What if God, seeking his own glory, is less like a narcissistic general safe in the rear, sending his troops to die just to make a name for himself, and more like the greatest general in history, who wins the war by dying on the front lines for his beloved troops? See the difference?
When you start to think about it that way, with those kinds of pictures in your head, the whole thing just flips, doesn't it? It shows us that God's glory and our own good aren't two separate things in a tug of war. Not at all. They're actually perfectly united. Here's the absolute key to the whole thing. The beauty of God, his glory, it isn't some treasure that he hoards for himself. It's the kind of beauty that actually reaches its highest expression, its climax, when it's given away, when it's shared. Edwards hit the nail on the head again with this. He says that God's majesty is actually shown in the greatness of his people's joy. Think about that. Our happiness, our delight in him, doesn't take away from his glory. It puts it on full display. It magnifies it for all to see. So it turns out that God's goal to communicate his glory and his goal to make us completely and forever happy, they aren't competing agendas. They're not at odds at all. They are one and the same goal, just looked at from two different sides of the coin. Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. What if the most God-glorifying thing God could possibly do is to make sure we find our greatest, most lasting happiness in him? If that's true, well, that changes everything.